Hey everyone, I'm doing a tutorial on diabetes this week. The pre-diabetes that I did from before was more of a concrete, black and white, clear-cut definition on how to come up with the diagnosis. And to me, whether you have pre-diabetes or diabetes, it's just, the bottom line is that it's just an elevated glucose level. Glucose is a very basic sugar that we have floating around in our blood. And if it's too high, it can cause problems. If it's too low, it can cause problems. So there's a sweet spot that we look for as doctors to make sure during your screening test you're healthy. Now if you come into my office with a body weight or a body mass index of 30, actually anything greater than 25, or high blood pressure, or I hear that you're not exercising, or I hear that you're working 60 to 70 hours a week, even if you enjoy what you do, it's still a formula for problems to occur. And that's what the screening process is all about. You come to your doctor's office for us to be expert at figuring out if you're living life properly or not, or what can we do to maximize on your life so you'll probably make it to 90 or 100 and feel really good. What I'm seeing now with the current medical practice is that it's mostly disease management or sick care. So we'll get you in if there isn't anything that looks bad, or if you're not going to complain, then we're probably going to just say come back in about a year until something becomes positive, which is this whole diabetes thing. When sugar gets to a certain level, we say you have diabetes. At that point in time, usually we'll give you medicines. We'll always tell you lose weight, exercise, get some sleep, and eat properly. But that's usually all we'll do is say that. Most of my colleagues will just do that. And then if you don't change anything in 3 to 6 months and your sugars are still high, medicine. And I can't fault the medical community for that, but as I'm alluding to, there's other things to really take advantage of. I have a whiteboard like this in my hallway, and the first board I have it's too full. I had to get a second board because I call them my summit boards. And just by giving people in this last 12 to 16 months, just by giving people information and empowering them to change the right direction, I've had people lose weight, and now, 16 months later into this new job I have, I'm having people get off their medicines, and that's what my second board is for. It's called the Summit Board. I have people sign when they can get off medicine or trim it down or go to the lowest dose, which is kind of cool. It's not the idea that you're getting off your medicines, it's the idea that you're living a healthy life. Then there's never a guarantee, but I will promise you that if you live a healthy life, you come to see me, the likelihood is that if we can maximize on everything to get you to 90 to 100, the likelihood is that your chances will be much lower than if you didn't do what I suggest. Just taking medicines does not make you bulletproof, and there's no guarantee that you'll avoid the heart attack, even with statins. There is no guarantee that even if we rock solid drop your cholesterol down, you're not going to have a heart attack if you're still obese, if you're still smoking, if you're still not exercising, you're still on your way. Now, don't get me wrong, medicines do work. I had a lady that called in today a little bit frantic because she checked out her sugar with her new machine that I gave her, and it was 200. And that is high. You're supposed to have a random sugar check or a pre-meal sugar check less than 100. And if it's higher than 100, technically we have to do something about it. Now, this is a new patient with a new diagnosis, and I'm sending her to the registered dietitian for a lot of great education on how to take care of this disease called diabetes, but she wasn't sure. She only had her first visit with a registered dietitian over at Advocate Sherman, so we're still in the learning process, and she wasn't sure what to do with that finger stick. Now, she wasn't having any symptoms. She's not obese, but she is pretty stressed out. So I told her, you know, you've probably been at that level for a while. Let's just wait. We'll still continue with trying to maximize on food, maximize on your activity, and maximize on your stress reduction. And then we'll see what happens. So the fact that she's checking and getting 200s, not good, but this is a good starting point, because usually there are ways to bring down that sugar. The body has its ways to take care of elevated sugar levels. It's called the pancreas. The pancreas is this little organ in the belly that secretes insulin. When your body senses that the bloodstream glucose levels are climbing, then usually the pancreas will secrete insulin. The insulin matches with the glucose, everything binds and it allows that sugar or glucose to get into the cell, out of the bloodstream. You can have glucose in the cell. You're not supposed to have that much glucose floating around. And when you have too much glucose floating around in the bloodstream because either there's not enough insulin or there's way too much glucose, then organs don't work right, the brain doesn't work right, the heart doesn't work right, the nerves don't function right, and everything starts to fall apart. There is a way without the insulin to get high glucose levels into the cell and out of the bloodstream, and that's called exercise. With exercise, there's a back door that actually you don't even need insulin. With exercise, the muscle opens up an emergency room back door, and it allows sugar or glucose to come out of the bloodstream back into the cell. It's for fight or flight, so that when you're running from a bear defending yourself, you don't have to wait for the pancreas to make insulin. You can actually get those energy packets of glucose right into cell, into muscle specifically, so you can move or fight, whatever is necessary. But the problem is that not too many of my patients exercise. And it doesn't have to be that you go to a gym, you spend 2 hours and you lift weights. I think there's benefits to exercise, to keep tone and to keep body weight in check and to make you feel good, keep your mood stable, make you sleep deeper. But sometimes it's too daunting of a task when I say I want you to go from 0 to 10 hours a week to exercise. Especially if you have no talent or no previous knowledge of exercise, organized sports, or what to do. I have to be careful as your doctor and your sports medicine doctor that you don't get injured, but I also have to be careful as your integrative medicine doctor that you do something. So the things that we do to change around life when there's a new diagnosis of diabetes are supposed to be small steps that lead to bigger steps that lead to sustainable change. You can sustain it, you don't even need me. I think that understanding the way food gets into the body, the way body uses up the food, and the way obesity comes about, I think it's more important to understand it. When you understand it, the predicament, it makes the answer a little bit easier to adapt. You know, I always say that with patients who have a new diagnosis of pre-diabetes or diabetes, and it's usually about 30, 40, or 50 years of age. And it's sometimes hard to fathom that, hey, I got a new diagnosis, I don't feel anything, I don't think I'm overweight, I feel great, I sleep okay. But when we do blood tests, especially in this medical model now, we do blood tests early to figure out who's at risk later. And many times when I have a patient in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, the things that we find now are the result of things you did back in your 20s. 10 years of smoking, 10 years of being overweight, 10 years of not exercising will cause problems. It might not cause problems at the time that you're going through that lifestyle, but it'll cause problems later on. That's the delayed payment. You're always going to owe your body something. So if you think you're bulletproof and you eat bad food and you don't exercise and you watch your waistline grow, just because you don't feel any symptoms doesn't mean your body's not going through damage. It is going through damage. It's probably repairing itself, but eventually it's going to slow down the repair process and the damage points will accumulate, and then you'll start to feel things. At that point in time, if you try to make changes, I'll be around, but it is much harder to make a lifestyle change at that point when you're in disease and you're feeling it than it is when you're ahead of the game. So that's what the beauty of screening tests are, but I find a lot of my colleagues are looking at the screening test and they're just saying, okay, just watch it, we'll see you in a couple months to a year. And it does code down to what's covered by insurance though, and insurance does not cover exercise. Insurance does not cover dietary or nutritional education until you're deep into your disease. Then it'll cover it, which seems backwards, but it will pay for behavioral health. Behavioral health in the form of counseling, psychology, maybe even psychiatry. It will pay for that, which is one of the keys of imbalance that causes people to hunt for food the wrong way. But there's still a stigma of being diagnosed with any kind of behavioral health or mood disorder. So it takes a lot to trust me to say you have to get to a counselor to learn relaxation techniques, mindfulness practice, meditation, guided imagery. You can see it on the faces of my patients when I say, I want you to go see a psychologist to help you relax. And usually it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. But in my opinion, it is part of the anti-inflammatory lifestyle to get some form of relaxation practice, some form of nutrition practice or education, and some form of activity. Unfortunately, you're on your own until the disease becomes obvious, and then you can use medicine, but to a certain degree. So you'll have to trust me that doing things preventively will pay in the long run. A lot of my patients will wonder, I don't take any sugar. That's a good thing. It's a good start not to take extra sugar in your diet or your daily meals. But you have to understand that glucose is a byproduct of sugar, but glucose is also a byproduct of everything else that you eat. Food comes into the body, we hunt for it, we eat it, we assimilate it, and if our stomachs are working properly, systems are amazing. They'll take anything solid and liquid and they'll convert them down to their basic building blocks, amino acids, carbohydrates, and fats, and then they'll divvy them up depending on what the body's calling for. It'll either be that the body burns up the energy packets that you just broke down, or it'll be that the body creates things, creates mood, proper mood. It'll create hormones, it'll create more activity, locomotion. It'll create things to support the species and the body, or it'll store. If there's too much food coming in and the same amount of activity, you're not going to be able to burn up. You have an overabundance of energy packets. You have used up everything you need to create. Now you're going to have to take that extra stuff. You don't just poop it out. You actually have to store more. So the more you eat without activity, the more you store, and that's where the inches come up. The other problem is if the food stays the same, but the activity decreases, again, you'll be able to burn, you'll be able to create, but you have to store because you haven't burned as much up. Again, obesity, with obesity, high blood pressure, with high blood pressure, eventually, glucose. So you can see how it's important to know about volume and quality of food. It's also important to know about burning up and moving. The human body, we are hunter-gatherers. We're supposed to move. We're genetically wired to feel good when we move. We're genetically wired to feel good when we go out and walk and see nature. We go to a vista. Anybody I take hiking, we get to a summit. The summit is so rewarding that the rest of the hike doesn't even matter, no matter how strenuous it took to get there. So we are hardwired to move, but some of us just don't. Whether it's not in the cards because you're too busy with your kids, or it's become a low priority and your business is more, it's okay to postpone activity temporarily, but you have to get back to it. Otherwise, obesity again will come up because you're not burning up. You still might be able to create, but you're not burning up the food that you normally take in. The third scenario is food stays the same or decreases, activity stays the same, but stress gets thrown into the mix. And that's a hormonal change.